The dust on the driveway hadn't settled for 9 years, but as the sleek black car pulled up, Aaron knew the silence was over, not because a mother had come home for her daughter, but because a ghost had come to collect a debt. Welcome back to your ultimate destination for gripping revenge stories, family betrayals, shocking betrayals, and emotional justice. Subscribe now and join a community and tell us where you're watching from. Turn on the notification bell for our next story. Are you ready to witness the ultimate payback? Let's get started. The morning light in the valley didn't arrive all at once. It bled slowly through the heavy canopy of ancient oaks, casting long, skeletal shadows across the porch of the farmhouse. For Aaron, the day always began at 5 a.m., long before the sun had the strength to burn off the mist clinging to the low-lying pastures. His ritual was one of penance and preservation. He would stoke the embers of the wood stove, the scent of cedar and old ash filling the kitchen, and listen to the house breathe. At 64, Aaron was a man carved out of local timber, sturdy, weathered, and deeply knotted by the seasons. His hands, once capable of framing a house in a week, were now mapped with the blue rivers of veins and the white scars of a lifetime of labor. But these hands had learned a new language over the last 9 years. They had learned how to braid hair without snagging the fine strands, how to apply a Disney-themed bandage to a scraped knee with surgical precision, and how to hold a trembling child during a thunderstorm while whispering that the sky was just clearing its throat. Upstairs, the floorboards groaned, a familiar, rhythmic creak that signaled Maya was awake. Aaron stood at the stove, flipping sourdough pancakes with a practiced flick of his wrist. He didn't need a timer. He knew the exact moment the bubbles on the surface reached the perfect density. This was his world, a fragile, beautiful bubble of routine that he had built from the wreckage of a tragedy. "Grandpa, I can't find my blue ribbon." Maya's voice drifted down the stairs, bright and impatient, the sound of a child who had never known the silence of a house without love. "Check the third drawer of the vanity, sweetheart, underneath your drawing pad." Aaron called back, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. A moment later, the thundering of small feet echoed in the hallway, and Maya skidded into the kitchen. At 9 years old, she was a mirror image of his late son, Leo. She had the same stubborn cowlick at the back of her head, and the same amber eyes that seemed to hold a hint of mischief even when she was being serious. But she also had a grace that didn't come from the men in the family, a certain way of tilting her head that sometimes made Aaron's heart stop. It was the only ghost of Allison he allowed in the house. "Found it," Maya said, triumphantly holding up the silk ribbon. She climbed onto the tall wooden stool, her legs swinging like pendulums. "Are we going to the creek after school? Sarah says the tadpoles are turning into frogs. If you finish your math homework without the usual 'I'm dying of boredom' speech, then yes, the creek is a go," Aaron teased, sliding a plate of pancakes in front of her. He watched her eat, his chest tightening with a familiar, fierce protectiveness. For 3,285 days, he had been the guardian of her joy. When Leo had been killed, a freak accident involving a structural collapse at a downtown job site, the world had gone gray. But when Leo's wife, Allison, had walked out 3 months later, the gray had turned into a suffocating black. He remembered that night vividly. The air had been heavy with the smell of an impending rainstorm. Allison had been sitting at this very table, staring at a glass of water as if it contained the secrets of the universe. She hadn't cried. She had just looked empty, like a house that had been gutted by fire while the exterior remained untouched. "I can't do this, Aaron," she had whispered. "Every time I look at her, I see the life I was supposed to have. I see the person I'm failing to be. She deserves more than a mother who is a ghost." He had tried to argue, to plead, to offer her a room in his own home so they could raise Maya together. But by the next morning, her car was gone, and a short, devastating note sat on the kitchen island. Since then, Aaron had become the architect of a new reality. He had sold his contracting business, moved into the old family farmhouse, and dedicated every waking second to ensuring Maya never felt the emptiness her mother had left behind. He told her stories about her father, how Leo could whistle like a meadowlark, and how he once built a birdhouse that was so nice the squirrels tried to move in. About Allison, he said very little. He told Maya that her mother was away, finding her way back, a phrase that felt like a lie every time it crossed his lips, but one that protected the girl from the jagged edges of abandonment. "Grandpa, you're doing this staring at the wall thing again," Maya said, her mouth full of pancake. Aaron laughed, a dry, raspy sound. "Just planning the day, Maya. Just planning the day." The morning progressed with the usual flurry of activity. Backpacks checked for forgotten permission slips, teeth brushed, and the daily look at the clock panic. Aaron drove her to the end of the long, gravel driveway to wait for the yellow school bus. As it pulled away, Maya's small hand waved frantically from the back window until the bus disappeared over the rise of the hill. Aaron stood in the silence of the gravel road for a long time. The valley was quiet, save for the distant lowing of a neighbor's cattle. He turned back toward the house, intending to spend the morning fixing the shingles on the shed, but something stopped him. A sound. It was the low, guttural purr of a high-performance engine. It was out of place in this world of rusted tractors and mud-caked trucks. Aaron's heart, usually steady as a metronome, skipped a beat. He shielded his eyes against the climbing sun. A sleek, charcoal-gray sedan rounded the bend. It moved with a predatory elegance, its polished chrome glinting like a blade. It didn't slow down for the potholes. It glided over them, eventually coming to a halt just inches from Aaron's old Ford F-150. The driver's door opened, and a pair of designer heels, sharp, thin, and entirely impractical for the country, stepped onto the gravel. Aaron felt the blood drain from his face. He knew that silhouette. He knew the way she tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. Allison stepped out of the car. She looked like a stranger wearing his daughter-in-law's face. She wore a tailored charcoal suit that matched her car, her eyes hidden behind oversized designer sunglasses. Her skin was perfectly bronzed, her lips a sharp, clinical red. There was no grief in her posture, no hesitation in her stride. She looked like a woman who had spent the last 9 years winning. "Aaron," she said. Her voice was cool, stripped of the jagged emotion he remembered. It sounded like the clicking of a keyboard. Aaron didn't move. He felt as if he were rooted to the earth, his heavy work boots suddenly weighing 100 pounds each. "You're on private property, Allison." She took off her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were bright but hard, like polished glass. She looked at the farmhouse, the peeling paint on the porch, the sagging gutter, the tire swing hanging from the oak tree, with a look of thinly veiled disdain. "It's good to see you too," she said, her voice dripping with a practiced irony. "You've kept the place exactly the same. It's like a time capsule of misery." "We aren't miserable," Aaron said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming the low growl of a cornered animal. "We were doing just fine. Why are you here? Why now?" Allison didn't answer immediately. She walked to the edge of the porch, running a gloved hand along the railing. "The 9th anniversary of Leo's death was last month. I'm sure you remembered. I've been speaking with the executors of his estate. Specifically, the trust his grandfather set up. The one that was tied to the 10-year mark of his marriage or his 35th birthday." Aaron felt a sick realization wash over him. His father, Leo's grandfather, had been a wealthy man, a man who believed in old-school legacies. He had left a substantial plot of land and a diversified portfolio to Leo, but with strict clauses. If Leo passed, the inheritance was to be held in a cooling period to ensure his heirs were settled. "You aren't here for Maya," Aaron breathed, the words feeling like poison. "You're here for the North acreage. You're here for the stocks." Allison turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "I am the legal widow, Aaron. I am the primary beneficiary. I've spent nearly a decade rebuilding my life in the city. I've started a firm. I've made a name for myself, but the market is volatile. That land is worth 5 times what it was when Leo died. Developers want it for a luxury resort. It's my inheritance. It's my right." "You're right." Aaron stepped toward her, his shadow swallowing her small frame. "You walked away from your rights the night you left a 3-month-old baby in a crib and drove away without looking back. You didn't want the responsibility of his daughter, so why do you think you deserve the rewards of his life?" "Don't be melodramatic," Allison snapped, her composure finally slipping to reveal a flash of anger. "I did what I had to do to survive. I wasn't built for this slow death in the mud. I gave Maya to the one person I knew would obsess over her. You should be thanking me for giving you a reason to keep breathing after Leo died." The audacity of the statement hit Aaron like a physical blow. He reached into the pocket of his work vest, his fingers brushing against a small, plastic dinosaur Maya had tucked there that morning for good luck. The contrast between the cold, calculating woman in front of him and the innocent soul inside the house was unbearable. "I don't want your thanks," Aaron said, his voice trembling with a decade's worth of repressed rage. "And you aren't getting a signature from me. The trust requires the guardian of the secondary heir, the child, to sign off on any liquidation of assets before the child is of age. And I am that guardian." Allison's eyes narrowed. She reached into her car and pulled out a leather briefcase, snapping the gold latches with a sound like a gunshot. She pulled out a stack of documents. "I've already filed the petition to reclaim primary guardianship," she said calmly. "If you won't sign the papers as a grandfather, you'll be forced to sign them as a man who lost his granddaughter in a custody battle. I have the money, the lawyers, and the biological mother's status." "What do you have, Aaron?" "A drafty house and a social security check." The world seemed to tilt. Aaron looked at the documents, the legal jargon blurring into a smear of black ink. She wasn't just coming for the money. She was using Maya as a hostage to get to it. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "Try me," Allison replied. She looked at her watch. "I'll be staying at the inn in town. You have 48 hours to sign the release for the North Acreage. If you do, I'll leave the custody alone. You keep the girl, I keep the land. It's a fair trade, don't you think?" She turned to get back into her car, but stopped, looking toward the house. "Is she here? I suppose I should at least see what I'm paying for." "Get out," Aaron said, his voice a ragged whisper. "Get off my land before I forget I'm a Christian." Allison shrugged, slid into the driver's seat, and reversed with a spray of gravel that rattled against the porch. Aaron stood there long after the dust had settled, the good luck dinosaur clutched so tightly in his hand that its plastic tail dug into his palm. The battle for the soul of his family had begun, and for the first time in 9 years, Aaron felt the walls of his fortress starting to crumble. The silence that followed the departure of Allison's car was heavier than the one that had preceded it. It was a thick, suffocating quiet that seemed to press against Aaron's chest, making every breath a chore. He stood on the porch, his eyes fixed on the spot where the charcoal-gray sedan had vanished, the scent of expensive perfume and exhaust fumes still hanging in the humid valley air. He looked down at his hand. He was still clutching the plastic dinosaur Maya had given him. He slowly opened his fist, seeing the deep, red indentations in his palm where the toy's tail had bitten into his skin. "Grandpa," the voice was small, hesitant. Aaron spun around to see Maya, standing behind the screen door. Her face was pressed against the mesh, her amber eyes wide with a confusion that made Aaron's stomach turn. She hadn't gone to the creek. The school bus wasn't due for hours. Then he remembered. Today was a half-day for teacher conferences. He had forgotten. He had been so lost in the ghost of the past that he had lost track of the present. "Who was that lady?" she asked, her voice trembling. "She looked like the picture in the silver frame you keep in the attic." Aaron felt the world tilt. He had tried so hard to curate her world, to keep the jagged edges of the truth tucked away until she was strong enough to handle them. But the truth was no longer a hidden thing. It was standing in his driveway in a charcoal suit, demanding a ransom. "Come here, Maya," Aaron said, sitting on the top step of the porch and patting the space beside him. She came out and sat, her small shoulder pressing against his arm. She was so thin, so fragile, yet she was the anchor that kept him from drifting into the abyss of his own grief. "That woman," Aaron started, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat, trying to find the strength to be the hero she thought he was. "That was Allison. That was your mother." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was hollow. Maya didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared at her own sneakers, her fingers twisting the hem of her denim skirt. "She didn't look like a mommy," Maya whispered finally. "She didn't even look at the door to see if I was there." The words were a physical blow to Aaron's heart. He wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "Sometimes, people get lost, Maya. Not the kind of lost where you need a map, but the kind where you forget who you are. She's very lost right now. Is she going to take me away?" Maya looked up, her eyes filling with a sudden, sharp terror. "I saw her holding papers. In movies, when people hold papers like that, they're taking things." Aaron looked at her, and for a fleeting second, he considered lying. He considered telling her that everything was fine, that it was just business. But he saw the intelligence in her gaze, the same sharp perception his son had possessed. Lying to her would be a betrayal of the trust they had built over 9 long years. She wants something that belonged to your daddy, Aaron said carefully. And she thinks that by threatening to take you, she can get it. But listen to me, Maya. Look at me. He took her chin in his hand. I have spent every day of the last 9 years making sure you are loved. I am not going to stop now. No paper, no lawyer, and no amount of money is going to change the fact that you belong here. With me. Promise. I promise on your daddy's soul. But as Maya tucked her head into his chest, Aaron's mind was already racing. He knew the reality of the situation. He was a man living on a fixed income, his savings depleted by years of providing for a growing girl. Allison had the world at her feet. She had the biological mother card, a weapon that the courts often found more persuasive than the devotion of an aging grandfather. After he got Maya settled inside with a book, Aaron retreated to his small office, a corner of the living room crowded with old blueprints and tax records. He pulled out the thick folder labeled LEO, Estate. He began to read. His father's will was a labyrinth of legalities. The North Acreage, 200 acres of prime, untouched forest and meadowland, was indeed the crown jewel. It was the land where Leo had planned to build their dream home. Aaron could still remember Leo standing on the ridge, pointing toward the valley. One day, Dad, Maya's going to run through these fields, and she'll never have to worry about a roof over her head. The trust stated that the land could only be sold or transferred if both the primary heir's spouse and the guardian of any minor children agreed that the sale was in the best interest of the child's future. Allison needed his signature to unlock the millions that the developers were offering. Without it, the land would remain in the trust until Maya turned 21. Aaron's phone rang. It was an unknown number. He answered it, his heart hammering. Aaron, it's Ben Green. Ben was an old friend, a lawyer in town who had handled Leo's probate. His voice sounded weary. Ben, I assume you've heard. She called me, Aaron. She has a high-powered firm out of the city sending over a formal petition for custody and a motion to compel the sale of the North Acreage. They're playing dirty. They're claiming that your age and limited financial resources are a detriment to Maya's upbringing. They're saying she needs the opportunities that her mother's wealth can provide. She hasn't seen the girl in 9 years, Ben. She didn't even know what grade she was in. I know, Aaron. I know. But in the eyes of the law, she's the mother. If she can prove she's stable now, and she has the bank accounts to prove it, a judge might see her return as a reformed parent seeking a second chance. The fact that there's a massive inheritance involved, well, her lawyers will argue that she wants the money for Maya's future. It's a lie. She wants it for herself. She said it to my face. It's a fair trade. The girl for the land. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Did she say that in front of witnesses, Aaron? No. Just us in the driveway. Then it's your word against hers. And she has the suit, the car, and the biological tie. Listen to me. If this goes to court, it's going to be ugly. They will dig into your life. They'll look at every penny you spend. They'll try to make this farmhouse look like a shack. Are you ready for that? Aaron looked out the window. He saw the tires swing. He saw the garden where he and Maya had planted sunflowers that now stood taller than she did. I don't have a choice, Ben. I am not selling my granddaughter's soul for a developer's check. Then we fight, Ben said. But Aaron, you need to be careful. Allison is desperate. And desperate people don't care who they hurt on the way to what they want. The next 48 hours were a blur of escalating tension. Aaron barely slept. He spent his nights sitting in the armchair in the living room, a shotgun leaning against the wall, not because he intended to use it, but because the weight of it made him feel less helpless. On Thursday morning, the deadline Allison had set, a knock came at the door. It wasn't the polite knock of a neighbor. It was the sharp, demanding rap of someone who felt they owned the place. Aaron opened the door. Allison stood there, but she wasn't alone. Beside her was a man in a dark suit holding a clipboard, and a woman with a lanyard around her neck that read social services. What is this? Aaron asked, his voice steady despite the roar of blood in his ears. This is an emergency welfare check, Allison said, her voice sounding coached, devoid of the venom from 2 days ago. I've expressed my concerns to the county about the living conditions here. I'm simply worried about my daughter's environment. The woman with the lanyard stepped forward. Mr. Miller? I'm Sarah Jenkins. We've received a report of an unsafe living environment, and potential medical neglect. We need to speak with Maya and inspect the premises. Medical neglect? She's the healthiest kid in the county. Aaron shouted. She hasn't had a dental checkup in 18 months, Aaron. Allison chimed in, checking her nails. And your records show you missed her last flu shot clinic. A child needs a mother's attention to detail, don't you think? This grandfather is facing an impossible choice. The home he built or the child he loves. If you think Aaron should fight no matter what the cost, leave a stay strong in the comments below. Aaron felt a wave of nausea. He had missed the dentist appointment because the truck had broken down and he hadn't had the $80 for the copay that month. He had chosen groceries over a cleaning. He had chosen Maya's joy over a bureaucratic checklist. She's in the kitchen, Aaron said, stepping aside. His heart felt like it was being squeezed by a cold hand. As the social worker moved into the house, Allison started to follow, but Aaron blocked her path again. You stay out here, he hissed. Oh, Aaron, she whispered, leaning in close so the social worker couldn't hear. You really should have just signed the papers. Now, by the time I'm done, the state will take her, and I'll get the land anyway because you'll be deemed an unfit guardian. You're playing a game you don't have the chips for. I have something you'll never understand, Allison, Aaron replied. And what's that? I have her heart. You just have a contract. Inside, he could hear the social worker talking to Maya. The tone was soft, but the questions were pointed. Do you always have enough to eat, Maya? Does your grandfather ever get angry? Do you have your own bed? Every question felt like a needle pricking Aaron's skin. He looked at Allison, who was leaning against the porch railing, looking bored. She wasn't a mother. She was a scavenger, picking at the bones of a family she had already killed once. Suddenly, a cry broke out from the kitchen. No, I don't want to go with her. Grandpa. Aaron pushed past Allison and ran inside. Maya was standing by the table, her face flushed red, tears streaming down her cheeks. She was clutching her backpack as if it were a shield. The social worker was trying to lead her toward the door. Mr. Miller, for the safety of the child during the investigation, we're placing her in the temporary custody of her mother, the social worker said, her face sympathetic but firm. Given the mother's resources and the documented concerns. No, Aaron roared. You can't do this. She doesn't even know her. I'm her mother, Allison said, stepping into the room with a triumphant glint in her eyes. Come here, Maya. We're going to a nice hotel. You can have whatever you want for dinner. We can go shopping. Maya shrank back, pressing herself against Aaron's legs. I don't want shopping. I want to go to the creek. Grandpa, don't let her. Aaron looked at the social worker, then at the man in the suit, then at the woman who had abandoned them. He felt a moment of pure, blinding rage. He wanted to scream, to fight, to tear the world apart. But then he looked down at Maya. He saw the terror in her eyes. If he fought now, if he became the angry, unstable old man they wanted him to be, he would lose her forever. He knelt down, ignoring the ache in his knees. He took Maya's hands in his. Maya, look at me, he said, his voice a forced calm. You remember what we talked about? About being brave? About the knights who had to go into the dark forest before they reached the castle? Maya nodded, her breath hitching in her throat. You have to be a knight for a little while, Aaron whispered. Go with her. It's just for a little bit. I am going to find the best lawyers in the world. I am going to bring you home. I promise. Do you trust me? Yes, she sobbed. Then go. Be brave. Don't let her see you cry. Aaron stood up and watched as Allison led his granddaughter out of the house. Maya didn't look back. She kept her head down, her small hand swallowed by Allison's manicured one. As the charcoal sedan pulled away for the second time, taking the light of his life with it, Aaron didn't collapse. He didn't cry. He walked to the phone and dialed Ben Green. Ben, Aaron said, his voice cold and hard as granite. Sell my truck. Sell the farm equipment. Sell everything. I don't care about the land anymore. I'm going to war. The farmhouse had never felt so large. Without the sound of Maya's humming or the rhythmic thud of her feet on the stairs, the building was just a collection of creaking wood and cold glass. Aaron sat at the kitchen table, the silence ringing in his ears. The half-eaten plate of pancakes from that morning, the last morning of his old life, still sat on the counter, the syrup hardened into a sticky, dark amber. He didn't clear it. He couldn't. To move that plate was to acknowledge that the cycle had been broken, that the night was truly in the dark forest. By noon the next day, Aaron's yard looked like a staging ground. Neighbors, farmers with sun-darkened skin, and men he had built houses with 30 years ago, pulled up in their battered trucks. Word traveled fast in the valley. They didn't ask questions. They just looked at the for sale signs Aaron was hammering into his equipment. "That's your father's 1952 tractor, Aaron," Silas, a neighbor from 2 miles down, said softly. "You sure about this? You sell this, she's gone for good." "The tractor doesn't have a soul, Silas," Aaron replied, his voice gravelly from lack of sleep. "The girl does. How much you got in your pocket?" By sunset, Aaron had traded his life's work for stacks of wrinkled $100 bills. He sold the backhoe, the grain drill, and the truck he'd driven for 15 years. He kept only the old sedan and enough tools to keep the house from falling down. When Ben Green arrived that evening, the lawyer looked at the empty barn and sighed. He carried a leather briefcase that felt heavier than it had the day before. "I've been digging, Aaron," Ben said, sitting at the kitchen table. He spread out a series of financial documents, many of them marked with red past due stamps. "I found out why Allison is playing for keeps. Her successful city firm? It's a shell. She's underwater. She pivoted into high-risk real estate speculation 3 years ago, and when the market dipped, she started using client funds to cover her margins. If she doesn't get the North Acreage money, the full $5 million from the developers, she's not just going broke. She's going to prison for embezzlement." Aaron stared at the papers. The truth was even uglier than he had imagined. "So she's not just using Maya as a hostage. She's using her as a shield." "Exactly," Ben nodded. "But here's the complication. To the court, a mother who is struggling but trying to reclaim her daughter can be seen as sympathetic. They'll view the land sale as her way out to provide a stable life for the child. We have to prove that her intent is purely predatory. But there's something else, Aaron. Something I found in Leo's private files." Ben pulled out a small, handwritten letter. The ink faded. It was Leo's handwriting. "What is this?" Aaron asked, his fingers trembling. "It's a letter Leo wrote to his lawyer 2 weeks before he died. He was planning to file for divorce, Aaron. He knew she was unstable back then. He had evidence that she was, well, she wasn't just breathless and sad. She was neglectful. There are photos in here of Maya as a baby, left alone for hours while Allison was out. Leo was building a case to take full custody before the accident happened." Aaron felt a surge of grief, so sharp he had to steady himself against the table. "He never told me. He wanted to protect me. He didn't want me to hate her." "This letter is our smoking gun," Ben said. "It proves that the loving mother narrative is a lie she's been telling for a decade. But we have to be careful. If we present this, her lawyers will go for your throat. They'll claim you've been hiding this to alienate Maya from her mother." "I don't care what they say about me," Aaron growled. "When do we see her?" "The preliminary hearing is tomorrow morning." "But Aaron, you need to know. Allison has Maya at the St. Regis in the city. I've heard reports from the Guardian ad litem. Maya isn't eating. She hasn't spoken a word since she left the farm." Aaron's heart shattered. He could see it. Maya, sitting in a sterile, gold-leafed hotel room, surrounded by expensive toys she didn't want, her amber eyes fixed on the door, waiting for a grandfather who hadn't come yet. The next morning, the courthouse was a cold, marble monolith. Aaron felt out of place in his only suit, a charcoal wool blend that smelled of mothballs and funerals. Across the hall, Allison stood surrounded by 3 men in sharp blue suits. She looked radiant, her hair perfectly coiffed, a look of serene maternal concern plastered on her face. When they entered the judge's chambers, the air felt thin. Judge Miller, no relation, though the name felt like a cruel irony, was a woman who looked like she had seen every version of human misery and remained unimpressed by all of them. "This is a motion for the immediate liquidation of the North Acreage Trust assets," Allison's lead lawyer began, his voice smooth as oil. "My client, Mrs. Miller, seeks to use these funds to establish a permanent residence for her daughter in the city, ensuring access to the best private schools and medical care, amenities that, as the court can see from the social worker's report, are currently lacking in her grandfather's care." Aaron gripped the arms of his chair. He looked at the social worker, Sarah Jenkins, who sat in the corner. She looked uncomfortable, her eyes avoiding his. "Your Honor," Ben Green stood up. "We contest the validity of this motion. This isn't about schools. This is about a woman who abandoned her child for 9 years and is now facing criminal financial charges. She is using this child as a financial lifeboat. That is a baseless smear. Allison's lawyer shouted. Is it? Ben countered, sliding Leo's letter across the desk. This is a statement of intent from the deceased father, outlining a history of neglect and a plan for divorce based on the mother's unfitness, written before she ever disappeared. The room went silent. Allison's face didn't crumble, it hardened. She turned to look at Aaron, her eyes burning with a cold, blue fire. You think a dead man's ramblings matter? She whispered, her voice cutting through the legal jargon. I am alive. I am here. And I am her mother. Judge Miller reviewed the letter slowly. The clock on the wall ticked with agonizing precision. Finally, she looked up. This letter is significant, the judge said. However, it is 9 years old. People change. The court's primary concern is the current welfare of the child. I've reviewed the social worker's report. Maya is showing signs of extreme distress. She is non-responsive. Because she's been kidnapped. Aaron burst out. Mr. Miller, sit down, the judge warned. She turned to the social worker. Ms. Jenkins, in your professional opinion, where is the child most likely to recover her equilibrium? Sarah Jenkins cleared her throat. Your Honor, while the grandfather's home is modest, the bond between them is undeniable. However, the mother's financial plan for the child's future is objectively superior. I am torn, but I believe the child needs stability. Moving her back and forth is damaging. Very well, the judge said. I am not ready to rule on the land sale yet, but I am ordering a supervised visitation. Today, at the mother's current residence. I want to see how the child reacts to both parties in the same room. We will reconvene tomorrow morning for a final decision on the trust and temporary custody. The supervised visitation took place in a private suite at the hotel. It was a room filled with white lilies and velvet furniture, a place where a child's muddy boots would be a crime. When Aaron walked in, he saw Maya. She was sitting on a sofa that was too big for her, wearing a brand new dress that still had the tags tucked into the collar. She looked like a doll. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. When she saw Aaron, she didn't run. She didn't have the energy. She just let out a small, broken sob and reached out her arms. Aaron crossed the room in 2 strides, pulling her into his lap, ignoring the social worker's clipboard and Allison's disgusted sigh from the window. I'm here, Maya. Aaron whispered into her hair. I'm here. The night found the forest path. Take me home. She whimpered into his neck. Please, Grandpa. It smells wrong here. I want the woods. I want the creek. I'm trying, sweetheart. I'm trying so hard. Allison walked over, her heels clicking like a countdown. Maya, don't be difficult. Look at this. She held out a glittering gold bracelet. This is real gold. Don't you want to be a princess? Your grandfather can only give you dirt and old stories. I can give you the world. Maya didn't even look at the jewelry. She buried her face deeper into Aaron's shoulder. I don't want the world. I want my grandpa. Allison's face twisted. The mask of the reformed mother finally began to melt, revealing the jagged desperation underneath. She leaned down, her voice a low, venomous hiss that only Aaron and Maya could hear. You're ruining this, she whispered to Aaron. You're going to make me lose everything. If I go down, I'm taking her with me. I'll move her to a boarding school in Europe. You'll never see her again. Sign the papers, Aaron. Sign the North Acreage over to me tonight, and I'll tell the judge I've had a change of heart about custody. I'll give her back to you. 1 signature for your granddaughter. Choose. Aaron looked at her. He saw the sweat on her upper lip. He saw the way her hand trembled as she held the gold bracelet. She was a cornered animal, and she was prepared to devour her own young to survive. You'd sell her, Aaron said, his voice loud enough for the social worker to look up. You're literally offering to sell your daughter for the North Acreage. I'm offering you a solution. Allison snapped, catching herself and looking back at the social worker with a forced smile. I mean, I'm offering a compromise that benefits everyone. The social worker frowned, scribbling something on her pad. Aaron felt a strange sense of clarity. He realized then that Allison didn't just want the money. She hated the love that he and Maya shared. It was a reminder of everything she was incapable of feeling. I have my answer, Aaron said, standing up while still holding Maya. And? Allison asked, her eyes wide with greedy anticipation. Aaron looked at the social worker. Ms. Jenkins, I'd like you to know what just happened, and I'd like to make a statement for the record. He turned back to Allison. The North Acreage isn't just land, Allison. It's where Leo is buried. It's where his heart is. And I will never, ever give a piece of his soul to a woman who thinks a daughter is something you can trade like a used car. He kissed the top of Maya's head. Be brave just one more night, Maya. The sun is coming up tomorrow. I promise. As Aaron walked out of the suite, he heard the sound of glass shattering. Allison had thrown the gold bracelet against the wall. He didn't look back. He had 12 hours until the final hearing. He had the money from the equipment. He had Leo's letter. And he had something Allison would never have, the truth. But as he stepped out into the cold city air, he knew he needed one more thing. He needed a miracle. The night before the final hearing felt like a vigil. Aaron sat in his darkened kitchen, the only light coming from a single lamp over the sink. On the table sat a weathered cardboard box he had retrieved from the attic, Leo's personal effects. He had combed through it 1,000 times, but tonight, he wasn't looking for memories. He was looking for ammunition. At 3 a.m., his fingers brushed against something wedged into the lining of Leo's old leather satchel. It was a small, digital voice recorder, the kind Leo used on job sites to note structural flaws. Aaron's heart hammered against his ribs. He pressed play. The first few clips were mundane, measurements for a porch, the sound of a hammer in the background. But the final recording was dated the day before Leo died. Allison, please, just look at her. Leo's voice echoed through the kitchen, vibrant and alive, sending a shiver down Aaron's spine. I can't, Leo. I'm drowning here. I need out. Allison's voice was shrill, hysterical. You're talking about leaving your daughter. If you walk out that door, you don't get to come back for the money. I'm changing the trust. I'm making sure you can't use her as a paycheck. Just give me my share now, and I'll go. I don't care about the girl. Aaron's breath hitched. There it was. The confession. The missing piece of the puzzle that proved Allison's abandonment wasn't a mental health crisis. It was a failed negotiation. The morning of the hearing, the courthouse was swamped with a sudden, oppressive heat. Aaron met Ben Green on the steps. Ben looked like he hadn't slept either. We have the financial records of her shell company, Ben whispered. It's worse than we thought. The SEC is opening a formal inquiry this morning. If we can delay the judge's ruling by 2 hours, Allison might be in handcuffs before she can sign for the land. We don't have 2 hours, Aaron said, tapping his pocket where the recorder lay. We have to end this now. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric. Allison sat at the defense table, looking haggard despite her heavy makeup. Her lawyers were whispering furiously, glancing at their phones. News of the SEC inquiry was leaking. Judge Miller hammered her gavel. This court is back in session. I have reviewed the supervised visitation report. It is clear the child has no bond with the mother. However, the legal presumption of biological custody remains. Mrs. Miller stepped forward. Allison stood, her legs slightly shaky. The court is prepared to grant temporary custody, the judge continued, provided the North acreage is liquidated to create a trust for the child's education. Do you agree to these terms? I do, Allison said, her voice a desperate rasp. She reached for the pen offered by her lawyer. Your Honor, wait. Aaron stood up. Before you let her sign away my son's legacy, there is something the court needs to hear. Not from me. From the man who owned that land. Allison's lawyer jumped up. Objection. This is highly irregular. Mr. Miller has already had his chance. I'll allow it, Judge Miller said, her eyes fixed on Aaron's face. She saw the raw, quiet dignity of a man who had nothing left to lose. What do you have, Mr. Miller? Aaron walked to the front of the room. He didn't look at the judge. He looked at Allison. He saw the terror in her eyes, the fear of a woman who had built a skyscraper on a foundation of sand. He placed the recorder on the evidence table and pressed play. The courtroom went dead silent as Leo's voice filled the room. The cold, transactional nature of Allison's words, I don't care about the girl, ripped through the air like a physical blade. Maya, who had been brought in by a court bailiff to wait in the back row, gasped. The sound of her mother's voice, so full of venom, seemed to wake her from her trance. That's a lie, Allison screamed, lunging toward the recorder. That's edited. He was abusive. He made me say those things. He was the best man I ever knew, Aaron said, his voice booming, drowning out her hysteria. And he died trying to build a world where his daughter would never have to hear those words. You didn't come back for Maya, Allison. You came back because the walls are closing in on your lies. You're not a mother. You're a debt collector. The judge looked at the recorder, then at the financial documents Ben Green had just handed to the clerk. Her expression shifted from professional neutrality to a cold, simmering disgust. "Mrs. Miller," the judge said, her voice like ice. "It has come to my attention that there is an active warrant for your arrest regarding financial fraud in the state of New York. And this recording, it paints a very different picture of your reformed status." I can explain," Allison stammered, backing away. But the doors at the back of the courtroom opened. 2 men in suits, federal marshals, stepped inside. "Allison Miller," one of them called out. The room erupted. Allison's lawyers began shouting about jurisdiction, but the marshals moved with practiced efficiency. In the chaos, Maya broke free from the bailiff. She didn't look at her mother as she was being led away in handcuffs. She didn't look at the judge. She ran straight for the one person who had never moved, never wavered, and never asked for anything in return for his love. Aaron caught her, lifting her high against his chest. He felt her small heart racing against his own, a frantic, rhythmic reminder of why he had fought. "Is it over, Grandpa?" she sobbed into his neck. "Are we going home?" Aaron looked at the judge. Judge Miller looked back, a small, weary smile touching her lips. She picked up her gavel and struck the wood with a finality that echoed through the marble halls. "Custody of Maya Miller is hereby returned to her grandfather, Aaron Miller. The trust regarding the North Acreage is to remain sealed and protected until the child reaches the age of 21. Case closed." Aaron didn't wait for the paperwork. He didn't wait for the lawyers to finish their posturing. He carried Maya out of the courtroom, through the lobby, and out into the bright, blinding afternoon sun. As they reached the sidewalk, they saw Allison being loaded into the back of a black government SUV. She looked out the window, her eyes meeting Aaron's for one final second. There was no apology in her gaze, only the hollow emptiness of someone who had realized too late that she had traded a diamond for a handful of gravel. Aaron turned his back on her. He walked to his old, dented sedan, the only thing he had left besides the house and the girl. "Look, Grandpa," Maya said, pointing to the dashboard. There, sitting on the faded upholstery, was the plastic dinosaur. It had fallen out of Aaron's pocket during the struggle. "It's our lucky charm," Maya whispered, clutching the toy. "We don't need luck anymore, sweetheart," Aaron said, starting the engine. "We have each other. And we're going home." The climax of a long journey often reveals who we truly are. Aaron risked everything, his livelihood, his reputation, and his peace, to save Maya. If you believe that family is about more than just blood, drop a heart in the comments. We're almost at the end of this emotional story. As the car pulled away from the city, the skyscrapers began to shrink in the rearview mirror, replaced by the rolling green hills and the jagged peaks of the valley. The air began to change, losing the scent of exhaust and hot pavement, becoming sweet with the smell of wild clover and wood smoke. They were 5 miles from the farm when Maya spoke again. "Grandpa, will she ever come back?" Aaron slowed the car, looking at the familiar silhouette of the North Acreage on the horizon, the trees standing tall, guarding the secrets of the man who had loved them both. "She might try one day, Maya," Aaron said honestly. "But by then, you'll be a queen in your own castle. And no one, not even a ghost, can take a kingdom that's built on love." Maya leaned her head against the window, watching the sunflowers pass by. For the first time in weeks, she began to hum. It was a low, wandering tune, the sound of a child who was no longer a knight in a dark forest, but a girl who had finally found her way back to the light. The homecoming was not marked by fanfare or celebration, but by the profound, healing power of silence. When Aaron's dented sedan finally turned into the gravel driveway of the farmhouse, the sun was beginning its slow descent behind the ridge of the North Acreage, painting the sky in bruised purples and liquid gold. The farm looked different than it had 48 hours ago. The barn stood open and hollow, stripped of the machinery that had defined Aaron's working life. The for sale signs were still stuck in the mud, looking like jagged tombstones for a life that had been liquidated. But as Maya stepped out of the car, she didn't see the empty barn or the missing tractor. She saw the tires swing. She saw the porch. She saw home. She ran to the oak tree, her fingers brushing the rough bark as if to confirm it was real. Aaron watched her from the car, his hands still gripping the steering wheel. He was exhausted, a deep, marrow-deep weariness that made his muscles tremble. He had won, but the cost was visible everywhere he looked. He was a man with a house, a granddaughter, and an empty bank account. "Grandpa, look," Maya pointed toward the porch. There, sitting in a neat row, were 4 large crates of groceries and a stack of cordwood. Taped to the front door was a manila envelope. Aaron climbed out of the car, his joints popping, and walked up the stairs to retrieve it. Inside was a collection of checks and crumpled cash, totaling the exact amount he had sold his father's 1952 tractor for. There was a note, written in Silas's shaky, looping handwriting. "A man shouldn't have to sell his soul to keep his heart. We bought the equipment back from the guys at the auction. It's all sitting in my shed. We'll bring it over tomorrow morning. Welcome home, Maya." Aaron felt a sob catch in his throat, a jagged, hot thing he had been holding back since the moment Allison first appeared. He leaned against the doorframe, the paper fluttering in his hand. He had spent his life building houses for these people, but he hadn't realized he had been building a community that would catch him when he fell. "What is it, Grandpa?" Maya asked, coming up the stairs and wrapping her arms around his waist. It's the village, Maya," Aaron whispered, smoothing her hair. The village came through. The next few weeks were a season of rebuilding. True to his word, Silas and a dozen other men from the valley arrived the next morning. They didn't just bring back the tractor and the tools. They brought paint, new gutters, and a truckload of gravel for the driveway. They worked in the quiet, efficient way of men who understood that some things are too heavy for one person to carry alone. As the physical scars of the farmhouse were mended, the emotional ones began to scab over as well. Maya began to talk again. At first, it was just small things, asking for an extra scoop of mashed potatoes or wondering if the creek was still high. But slowly, the silver bell of her laughter returned to the hallways. She never asked about Allison. It was as if that week in the city had been a fever dream, a dark shadow that had passed over the sun and then vanished. Aaron, however, didn't want her to grow up with a hole where her history should be. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the fireflies dance in the tall grass of the north acreage, he decided it was time. "Maya," he said softly, "I have something for you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, tarnished silver key. It was the key to the trunk in the attic, the one that held Leo's childhood photos and the few items of Allison's that hadn't been tainted by greed. "Your mother, she made some very bad choices," Aaron began, choosing his words with the care of a man walking on thin ice. "She let the world make her hard. But before the hardness took over, she loved your daddy. And for a little while, before she got lost, she held you and sang to you. I don't want you to remember her as a lady in a suit with handcuffs. I want you to know that you came from love, even if that love got broken along the way." Maya took the key, her small thumb rubbing the metal. "I think I'll wait a while to open it, Grandpa. I have everything I need right here." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and for the first time in years, Aaron felt the tension leave his neck. The north acreage was safe. It wouldn't be turned into a luxury resort or a playground for the wealthy. It would stay exactly what it was meant to be, a sanctuary. Months turned into a year. The news of Allison's sentencing reached them through a brief letter from Ben Green. She had been given 5 years in a minimum security facility. She hadn't asked for visitation. She hadn't sent a card for Maya's 10th birthday. It was a clean break, a surgical removal of a cancer that had threatened to consume them. One Saturday, Aaron took Maya up to the ridge of the north acreage. It was a steep climb, one that tested Aaron's knees, but when they reached the top, the view was worth every ache. From here, they could see the entire valley, the farmhouse looking like a toy nestled in a quilt of green and gold. "This is where your daddy wanted to build," Aaron said, gesturing to a flat plateau surrounded by wildflowers. "He used to say that from up here, you could see the future coming before it even arrived." Maya walked to the center of the plateau and sat down, closing her eyes and letting the wind whip through her hair. "I can see it, Grandpa. I can see the house. It has a big porch, bigger than yours." "Oh, is that so?" Aaron chuckled, sitting down beside her. "Yeah, and there's a room for you, right on the ground floor, so your knees don't hurt." Aaron looked at her, and in that moment, he saw the ultimate redemption. He saw that the cycle of abandonment had been broken. He had stayed, and because he had stayed, Maya knew how to build a future that included the people who loved her. She wasn't looking for a way out. She was looking for a way to stay. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a long, golden shadow across the ridge, Aaron reached into his pocket and pulled out the small digital recorder. He had kept it all this time, a reminder of the battle. But as he looked at Maya's peaceful face, he realized he didn't need the reminder anymore. He didn't need the evidence of Allison's failure to justify his own devotion. He pressed the delete button, watching the small screen blink as the recording of the past vanished into digital nothingness. "Grandpa," Maya asked, opening her eyes. "What was that?" "Just clearing some space, sweetheart," Aaron said, standing up and offering her his hand. "Just clearing some space for new stories." They walked down the hill together, their shadows stretching out before them, merging into one long, dark line that pointed toward the lights of the farmhouse. The inheritance wasn't the land. It wasn't the stocks or the money or the potential for a luxury resort. The true inheritance was the smell of cedar in the morning, the sound of a wood stove humming in the winter, and the knowledge that no matter how far someone might wander, there was a light in the window of a drafty old farmhouse that would never, ever go out. Aaron Miller had started the journey as a man trying to save a child. He ended it as a man who had been saved by one. This story reminds us that the greatest legacy we leave behind isn't money. It's the love we invest in the people who matter most. If this story moved you, please leave a comment with the word legacy and tell us about a grandparent or parent who never gave up on you. Your words help keep these stories alive. The screen fades to a soft image of the farmhouse at night, the kitchen light glowing warmly against the darkness of the valley. A final message appears. True family isn't about who gave you life, but who was there to make sure you lived it. Thank you so much for watching my story all the way to the end. Your support means everything. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.